Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is, as always, sharp and simple. You provide us with a stack of articles, research, and data, and we extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight. We give you that shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're navigating a really critical intersection. We're looking at real estate, financial stability, and urgent social need, specifically focusing on special needs and affordable housing models.
Yeah, and this is a deep dive that really requires us to look past the usual real estate chatter. We're going to be analyzing the mechanics of stability, not just for the residents, but for the property owners too. And we'll examine the massive and often, frankly, precarious efforts that communities are undertaking to meet this housing crisis head on.
And our source material for today is drawn mostly from the blog and services of Robert Flowers. And if you've been with us before, you know his work. He's been on previous episodes, and the audience loved the insights he provided, especially on finding genuine social good inside of, sustainable business models. It's that exact pivot, how stability can be built through social alignment, that we really need to analyze today.
Exactly. The scope is pretty much defined by necessity here. We need to understand the structural reasons why traditional landlords are pivoting away from market rate rentals, why they're moving toward models like special needs housing. We also need to map out the scale of the commitment, where the big money is actually moving. And finally, we have to confront the unexpected roadblocks, like housing market stagnation being linked to affordability mandates or the crisis spreading into rural areas.
Okay, let's unpack that core claim right away. The sources point to a reality property managers rarely talk about. That reality, it seems, is the headache of volatility. We know property management is riddled with risk. High tenant turnover, evictions, unexpected maintenance.
Inconsistent rent collection, all of it, all tied to individual credit cycles. But Flowers material frames special needs housing as a solution for landlord stability. And that's the key.
Oh, is that possible?
Well, the implied insight is that traditional market real estate is just becoming too volatile for investors who are looking for genuinely steady, predictable returns. When your entire income is reliant on a single tenant's personal finances, you're just perpetually vulnerable.
Right.
And the source addresses this directly with the title, Why Some Landlords Never Worry About Vacancy, and it has nothing to do with credit scores.
That is a massive claim. In the property world, nothing is more terrifying than vacancy or, an inconsistent payer. So if it's not about credit scores, what's the source of this stability?
It fundamentally changes the operational model. You're moving from a B2C, a business to consumer model, to something much closer to B2G.
Business to government or institution.
Exactly. When the source highlights passive income through special needs housing enrollment, they're talking about a pivot where the stability comes from leveraging that institutional support.
Okay, let's nail down that mechanism because this is the critical nugget for you, our listeners. What does enrollment functionally mean, and how does it bypass a concern like vacancy?
The stability is anchored not by the individual tenant's ability to pay market rent, but by consistently funded government programs, or state waivers, or even long-term contracts with local nonprofits or support organizations.
So you're trading one kind of risk for another.
Precisely. You are trading individual tenant risk, which is high, for regulatory compliance risk, which is different, but potentially much more predictable.
So the subsidy or the institutional payment becomes the new credit score. When the tenant is housed through a program, the rent money is linked to a consistently funded state or federal budget line, not the ups and downs of someone's job.
That's it. If the property is enrolled and compliant with the program requirements, the payment is guaranteed by the program sponsor. This dramatically mitigates the risks of late payments, broken leases, and those long, costly eviction processes that just plague traditional property management.
So you're relying on consistent social need, which is,
sadly, very high and very predictable, rather than market demand volatility.
Okay, so summarizing this strategic pivot for you, the shift isn't being framed as purely altruistic. It's presented as a high-level structural strategy to get greater landlord stability by aligning the property investment with essential social services, basically insulating it from typical market ups and downs.
And that stability model, it requires a massive infrastructure, which brings us directly to how communities are reacting to the crisis at large. If stability is found in servicing vulnerable populations, what kind of investments are municipalities making?
And this is where we really start to see the scale of the societal reaction. Let's look at how communities are tackling this, starting with some truly significant capital commitments. It's clear this is no longer a small, localized issue.
No, not at all. And we have to highlight the level of political commitment this crisis now commands. Detroit, for instance. They made an inspiring commitment of $80 million to an affordable housing project, one designed specifically for vulnerable residents.
80 million.
That scale of investment isn't just about building units, it signals a massive shift in municipal bonding priorities. It means the crisis has, crossed a political tipping point.
$80 million is huge. It represents a fundamental civic priority. But sometimes the most innovative solutions aren't new construction, they're about creative repurposing. The sources detail a fascinating example in Hawaii.
The conversion of the Dolphin Bay Hotel in Hilo, yes, this highlights a trend. Taking existing, established infrastructure, in this case, one that was tied to the high-cost tourism economy, and reorienting it to meet critical local residential needs. And that conversion model is particularly viable in high-cost, high-tourism areas where you already have structures zoned and plumbed for dense occupancy.
That's a genius piece of adaptive reuse. And connecting that scale of construction back to the human element, the sources mention Ability Housing. They're unveiling their latest affordable community, and they underscore that providing a secure home is it's vital, especially for dignity and safety. It's about building a foundation so people can thrive.
And the response isn't exclusively driven by those massive municipal budgets. Small, highly targeted funding is just as crucial for access.
Exactly. We also saw that nonprofit in Mississippi receiving $58,000 in grants to improve access to affordable housing solutions. That type of targeted grant money is so crucial, not necessarily for building the physical units, but for streamlining processes, navigating complex eligibility requirements, and providing direct support to people just trying to find their way into stable housing.
And if we connect this all to the bigger picture, these examples show community development focusing intently on vulnerable populations. And they're doing it across incredibly diverse geographical areas. From creative conversions in island states like Hawaii to massive public commitments in industrial centers like Detroit and the essential access networks in rural Mississippi. The problem and the solutions are truly nationwide.
But the path forward is definitely not smooth. And this is where the conversation turns critical. We need to look at where good intentions run into complex, unintended consequences.
This brings us to the fundamental tension, really. The tension between mandated social good and the realities of market economics. Take New Orleans. The source material reveals that the housing market there is actually experiencing stagnation. And that stagnation is linked directly to local affordability mandates.
That's the classic tension, isn't it? When a mandate intended to guarantee affordability and protect tenants unintentionally restricts development. How do the sources suggest we break that deadlock? Because if development slows, it just makes the overall housing shortage worse, even with good intent.
It creates a really difficult paradox for policymakers. Developers, they rely on a degree of profit predictability. If affordability mandates impose costs that make a project economically unviable through lengthy processes, high fees, or restrictive caps on rent increases, well, developers may simply choose not to build, or they'll look for opportunities elsewhere. This really highlights that the design of the mandate is just as crucial as the intention behind it.
And while New Orleans is a major urban center that often sees these regulatory battles, one of the most surprising facts in the source material is the geographical spread of the crisis. We've largely talked about the housing crisis as a major coastal or inner city issue, but the sources explicitly state it is hammering rural America.
That detail is critical. It changes the entire dynamic of the emergency. Rural communities often lack the political capital or the municipal resources to organize an $80 million commitment. When housing crises hit rural America, it's often tied to shifts in local employment, the lack of public transit, and just a scarcity of the supportive services that are necessary for vulnerable populations.
It also means the nature of development is different. You don't have existing high-density buildings to convert, like that hotel in Hawaii. Rural solutions require totally different approaches, often involving single-family or small multi-unit construction, which can be more expensive per unit.
And even when communities do successfully launch a project with strong public goodwill, financing remains precarious. We see that complexity in Granby. The community there is literally racing to save its flagship affordable housing project after reported financial missteps.
That race to save a project that's already underway, a rescue mission, effectively, it just shows the inherent fragility of it all. It sounds like even with millions of dollars in strong community support, one bad piece of accounting can potentially derail essential housing for dozens of families.
This raises the important question we have to ask as we look at the national picture. How do we balance mandates for affordability that are robust enough to protect residents, but flexible enough to ensure market health and growth? The sources show us that even with the best community intent, the implementation and long-term financial stability of these projects are incredibly precarious.
It's clear that the sheer administrative and financial complexity is a major roadblock. Sometimes it even outweighs the availability of capital.
So, to synthesize this deep dive, we started by looking at special needs housing as a stable business model. The whole passive impact approach that reduces landlord volatility through institutional enrollment. We then track the public response across the U.S., which is marked by massive, expensive, and often fragile efforts to solve the affordability crisis. What's so fascinating is the duality we uncovered. This area is both a private, profitable, strategic opportunity and a massive societal challenge requiring heroic commitments and, last-minute financial rescue missions.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener, whether you are interested in investment strategy or in community advocacy? The sources make it clear that the future of housing stability, both for property owners seeking consistent returns and for the residents who need a secure home. It involves catering to vulnerable demographics and finding innovative non-traditional income paths that rely on consistent social need rather than pure market cycles.
The ultimate lesson here is that stability is a strategic choice, whether that strategy involves converting a hotel or leveraging government subsidies.
Absolutely. And as we close, here is a final provocative thought for you to explore on your own. We looked at the New Orleans example, where affordability mandates may be contributing to housing stagnation. Think about the tension this creates. When does the need for immediate strong protection unintentionally undermine the long-term solution by restricting supply? It's a paradox that has to be resolved if we are ever going to truly solve this crisis. And finally, a big thank you to you, our listener, for supplying the research and source material for this deep dive. If you want to follow up on the specific business model Robert Flowers discussed, you can visit passiveimpactbookstore.com for his book, The Joy of Helping Others. Or you can contact Mr. Flowers directly for further consultation. That number is 901-621-3544. Thank you for joining us for another deep dive.